Wah wah wee woo. That's what some comedian says on his travel
Hmm.
adventure show. I didn't think I was gonna reference it. It came out automatically. You stumbled into a show. It's called the Binge-Watchers podcast. My name is John, but they call me Johnny Spoiler because I often spoil the movies that I love, or sometimes it coincides with the movies that we're talking about. Jordan just told me this was a fun one tonight. The tagline for tonight's movie is "Be careful what you wish for."
Go figure.
And I was gonna do some research and see, like, oh, what are people wishing for? Blah blah blah. And of course, people are boring. They wish for the same things all the time. I thought I would find like some crazy wish, like, oh, I wish fish could fly or something, or like that we could instantly travel to outer space, or
That my cat
just
could talk or something.
yeah. We could really understand our animals or whatever. No, it's just health, wealth, and happiness.
Mm.
And if you're a fan of American movies, then that gets translated into sex, money, and power.
There you go.
But then I realized I actually don't care what people wish for. I don't think I like them enough to care what they're wishing for. So I was like, I was like, it'd be nice not to be bothered. Like, imagine that, like, wishing for not to be bothered, or a cheeseburger, but the cheeseburger's never as good as you think it is. Like, your brain is like wired to think that, oh man, this cheeseburger is going to be awesome.
But that's the moral of the story, is be careful what you wish for. To not be bothered, then you get turned into being invisible. You ask for a burger, it's an impossible burger. So like you have to be careful with what you wish for.
Somebody's probably wishing that this podcast was better. Can't help you.
Sorry, stay strapped, okay?
Crack open a cold box of wine or pour something cold on ice, because it's the Binge-Watchers podcast.
You know what? The Wawa Wee is Sacha Baron Cohen when he plays Borat. I couldn't think it was the name of his character in the beginning when I was doing the Wawa Wee noise.
It's funny because that's like definitely not the first quote that like most people think of when they think of that role, Like,
really?
Like, not my opinion.
I think of the sound effects that he makes all the time.
It's like, very nice. There's like so many
very
ones.
nice. Like,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. There was like a 10-year run where everybody on the street was like quoting that dude,
Oh, I know. So, yeah.
He had a good run.
He did.
I saw him on a recent interview, like I think it was the Hollywood Reporter. I don't know if you've ever seen their channel, but like they get like roundtables of actors and directors together and stuff, especially during like around award season. But anyway, he was on one with Jim Carrey too. Yeah, they were in the same panel, but he's like talking about how like his whole thing was like showing up in places that they didn't know he was a comedian or they didn't know who he was. But some of his shows got such notoriety that he can no longer do like the prank first or drop his characters into like environments with real people, right?
Well, that was like his shtick, was like kind of getting that comedy, in real life. So makes sense.
Let's go on. Let's see what's going on in the world of movies and TVs and home videos and streamers and all that good stuff and home video headlines. Tim Burton and the Gone Girl writer, who I don't know, is her name Gillian Flynn or Gillian Flynn? Who the hell knows? Gone Girl's good though. I don't know. Do you ever see that where the wife disappears?
Yeah.
They blame the husband, and it's almost like that Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson story. Like it feels like it's ripped from the headlines, but then like you're just watching like aggro Ben Affleck trying to convince the whole country that he didn't kill his wife, and then like meanwhile she's manipulating him from like 2 states away, or what? You know what I mean? Like that's a good movie too.
So good.
We'll get to that eventually, maybe. But so apparently that writer and then Tim Burton, they're gonna do a remake of the 1958 sci-fi movie Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, which is actually a classic B movie. I don't remember why she's grown to 60 feet tall. But I remember they did that thing where they just made her look big and she could smash things like cars and buildings and people. I don't. Who knows?
Sounds interesting.
I mean, from an emotional level, woman scorned. That's a phrase too, right? What do they say? Nothing like a woman scorned or something like that.
Yeah.
Something. Anyway,
Something
it could be fun. Could be fun. We'll see what happens. Need some sadder news. Lost Carl Weathers, who you might know as Apollo Creed from the Rocky movies, or Dylan from the original Predator, or Chubbs Peterson, the local golf club pro in Happy Gilmore. More recently, you might have seen him as Grief Karga in the Mandalorian series. He plays like a senator in outer space. I don't know. At like the space colony that Mandalorian's helping on this little planet. Seemed like a cool dude. You've got like 40 years of movies to look at him. And also he played for the Raiders. He was like a football player originally, a bad boy when the Raiders were really bad and notorious, you know. What else is going on? That's about it. Tonight's movie is called Wishmaster. It's about an evil creature who's released after being in prison for centuries, and he tries to steal the soul of the scientists who let him out, and then awaken all the other little evil creatures. They're called Djinn. They're alluding to the fact that genies, or Djinn as they're really known in Eastern philosophy and Eastern mythology. But this movie supposes that they're all bad, and your wishes are like booby trapped, like to come back to get you. Do you have some savage stats about this crazy 90s horror movie called Wishmaster?
I do. Okay, so let's see where I want to start. I tried to get a little creative with it tonight, so bear with me. Characters from the movie, they're named Finney, Beaumont, Derleth, and Merritt. They're all actually references to early 20th century science fiction and horror writers, which is pretty cool. Jack Finney, Charles Beaumont, August Derleth, and Abraham Merritt, or A. Merritt. Jack Finney is most famously known for writing The Body Snatchers and Time Again. Of course, the film Invasion of Body Snatchers is what was based off of the book, or thing of writing that he did. So that's pretty cool.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers has come up on the podcast like twice times in recent memory.
In the last couple of years.
It's stalking us. It's like suggesting that we should get to it, which is funny because Wishmaster, I've talked about this movie on the pod before, but I don't think we've ever given it like center attention like this.
Yeah, maybe it's making it to the top of the list here. And then Charles Beaumont, he is a writer of a lot of classic episodes of the Twilight Zone. Episodes such as The Howling Man, Static, Miniature, Printer's Devil, and Number 12 Looks Just Like You. We have August Derleth. He made major contributions to... You'll have to... I, of course, had to look up the pronunciation for this, and now as I'm taking a look at the word, Cthulhu mythos.
Oh yeah, Cthulhu. He's a giant octopus that floats around outer space.
So August Derleth had made some major contributions to the mythos of Cthulhu. And then A. Merritt is apparently this like massive horror writer of, he was essentially inducted into the 1999 Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame. There was like this massive list of things that he had done. So feel free to check it out yourself, because I could spend literally the next 40 minutes talking about all of the stuff he wrote. So he's just
keep it trucking, keep it moving. Don't put us to sleep with some book catalog. This isn't called Book Readers.
Okay.
This isn't the Book Readers podcast. What's a book, Jordan? What are words? What is the English alphabet?
Snorefest. Okay. I figured you were going to talk a little bit about Djinn folklore.
You thought I was going to talk about them damn genies, huh?
Just because you're always, you're kind of like the mythology guy, but...
Well, only to say, like, this movie makes them evil, but we know that the remake of Clash of the Titans suggests that they're anti-heroes and misunderstood, right? Because they have a Djinn in that movie that helps them out.
Yes.
Yeah.
he becomes
the blue fire angle is cool. I don't know if that's in your stats. Probably
it
is. Is it? All right.
Yeah. So they're actually born of flame and have eyes that glow blue because they come from the heart of flame. The blue
and the super hot flames burn blue or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So Andrew Dikov's dark brown eyes are touched up in the film to cast that blue like light around it to essentially.
Oh, you know why I'm not talking about Djinns?
Why?
It's because of this movie. Because this movie makes me not trust them. Like
Makes
now
sense.
I'm biased against the genies. They're like, hey, rub my lamp. Here's 3 wishes, bro. I'm not wishing 3 times. No, thank you. You're gonna make my skeleton jump out of my body. No thanks.
Literally. Yeah, so that's essentially why they do the blue. It's just to reference that the Djinn is taking, his form when he's human. But it took him 3.5 hours to get into costume, and then an hour and a half to get out when he is essentially dressed up as like the Djinn in its natural form. But those were some of his most favorite scenes to film with all of the rest of his monstrous brethren. And I mean, that's pretty much it. There was a pretty cool quote just about how it was a pretty short schedule. They had to deliver the film in pretty much 6 months to start. They shot it in 33 days in LA, which was pretty tough. And they had dozens of different locations all around the city. So I think that's pretty sweet. That's like in no time, shooting in 33 days. That seems like a pretty quick turnaround. So that's it for Savage Stats.
Holy crap. I thought you were going to mention that like all the horror movie cameos, because Robert Englund's there, who plays Freddy Krueger.
You got Angus Scrim from Phantasm, Tony Todd from Night of the Living Dead, Candyman. You got Kane Hodder from various Friday the 13th.
Jason in like 4 of the movies. Yeah.
You got Reggie Bannister and then Ted Riami from
Although the movie does, with the exception of Robert Englund, who's playing like the, I don't know, rich art collector who kicks off the story, like Kane Hodder just plays a security guard that gets turned to glass. He gets pushed into the glass door and then shattered. So they're all horror movie stars, but they're kind of like one and done. You know what I mean? Their cameos are quick and short because they're victims in this one.
Yeah.
It was cool to see the dude from Phantasm. He was the guy playing the pharmacist who the bum wishes that he has cancer and dies or whatever. It's like instant cancer, and the Djinn kills him.
Yeah.
That was a cool cameo. That's a rare cameo too, because you have to be like a horror movie super fan to pull him out, because he's like a B movie or C level. Like he's literally only known from Phantasm, which is about these, I don't know, an interdimensional boogeyman who attacks people with these floating balls that have metal. They're like metal orbs that fly through the air, and then they open up like these little razors or whatever come out of them. And his character in that movie, the guy you were talking about, he's an ice cream man who helps 2 brothers who encounter the boogeyman, and their kind of lives are intertwined with like the activities of the tall man. He's called the Tall Man. And there's like 4 or 5 movies or something. And Reggie the Ice Cream Man, is like a hero in that. And he has like anyway. Like you said earlier, you could just talk about horror books all day. I was like, we could talk about Phantasm all night. Freak. Where are we? Oh, okay. If you love movies as much as we do, then you can order a whole box of them from lovethegoodmedia.com by going to lovethegoodmedia.com/binge. You can support the podcast by supporting our affiliate and trying out their movie boxes or their bargain bin or their on-demand movies that they sell. And if you're more of a video game fan, guess what? You can get video games there, or you can get even records, vinyl records, dude. And dudettes and dudums and whatever else you are. And Djinns. If you're out there, genies, you got to fulfill some wishes. Maybe order up some movies. All right. Now back to the podcast already in progress. I really kind of did like a very subtle slip in there. Favorite bits from Wishmaster. Do you have some, Jordan?
I do. I would
First of all, could you share your excitement for the movie selection of the week?
I was excited. I don't know. This off of the poster, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And I read the synopsis and I was like, okay, this is like right up my alley. And I think that's kind of a little bit of my favorite part is like, it's just such that like late 90s vibe, especially with the effects. You kind of get a mix of both like really good physical effects with really bad effects. And it just like, it's such a timepiece. Like, one of the physical effects that I thought was really good, you mentioned the pharmacist. He essentially gets like immediate cancer and dies. Like his face is like kind of all like pussy and disgusting, and it's got like these tumors. Another one of my favorite bits is when essentially, what's his name? The Djinn, he's in his human form and he goes to the police station to find information about Alex. And he essentially is there to try to figure out where she lives. And so he gets one of the officers to be able to make a wish that the officer could essentially put this criminal who's in the station away for good. And of course, the criminal just like creates a massive scene, shooting people within the police station. And he like somehow rips somebody's jaw off, like one of the, police officers. And like that physical effect, in my opinion, was like really good. Mm-hmm. But then you're also mixed with like the not so great, like you mentioned, the security guard who gets like kind of put into the glass.
In the glass, and then it's like
and the glass like shatters, and it's like So,
but it's like a flat 2D perspective of glass, so you don't believe that it's real. The watery effects are all right. They had some T2 style like watery dimensional transitional effects. When you go into the Djinn's world inside the gem he's trapped in, they make everything waver, like the screen ripples. And they had you gotta say, like, the movie has a killer opening because there's like bloody mayhem in the very beginning of the movie with a body count that's like 25 in the first like 5 minutes of the movie, because the Djinn's unleashed in like the Middle Ages, and then like it's the dude, the local sorcerer's job to like, oh, I gotta fix the kingdom real quick, guys. Come up with a solution here. As we rip through everybody.
Well, and they like tie that back with the party at the very end. It's almost like the exact same scene of like you have these like monstrous, he called them monstrous brethren, they're like coming through, and there's like weird tentacles and stuff coming out from everywhere. And it
gets a little bit of Hellraiser in the modern party, with the piano wires.
Very Hellraiser-y,
At least one of the special effects guys, who's also, I guess, the director of the movie, Robert Kurtzman, because he has that company with Greg Nicotero now, I think, KNB or whatever, KNG or whatever. He like was killed by the piano wire, and then he might have been one of the SWAT guys too. I'm not sure, but he like the director had a couple cameos in the movie. Do you have any other favorite bits?
Those are perfect. I wrote down like tons of stuff, so I could just like riff off of you a little bit.
Well, I wrote down like I loved in the beginning when the skeleton. I mentioned it earlier, like when the skeleton gets ripped out of that dude's body while he's still alive, and then he's just like a living skeleton. Yeah, that was pretty good. What else do I have written down? Scribbled notes here. Oh, all the horror movie references. We mentioned that. The Djinn evolves, like as he gets more powerful, the more souls he collects, he like gets more muscular. There's more like tone and structure to the way that he looks as a creature. His tentacles that are coming out of the back, his tentacle dreads, whatever they're called, his power nodules out of his back of his head get longer and more distinct. And the beginning is kind of funny because he's like he's a little dude, and he's crawling over the first victim, and he's like, what would you wish for if you could wish for something? You know what I mean? He's very like suggestive in the beginning because he's like all weak. And it kind of reminds me of like there's a character called Cell in Dragon Ball Z who like also gets more power by absorbing people, but he literally is scaly and tentacly and has a suction tube, kind of like the Djinn. And I'm like, this is all happening at the same time. Like, which one came first? Like the Djinn in this movie or Cell in Dragon Ball Z? Because it's almost like the exact same like evolution of powers, like how they distribute everything. This is a real fun movie, and like I had fun breaking away from like the bad romance or relationship things to go in like, oh, let's watch Wishmaster. I have a feeling that I'm gonna sneak in all three of the sequels into this
Bring
year's
it on.
lineup.
Yeah.
And folks, if you're wondering, they're all available on Tubi right now, so go watch them before they disappear. Yeah, that's it. That's favorite bits. We can jump into ratings. Jordan, tell the audience how we rate things around here.
Yes, so you hear it here, and I will lay it out for you. We've got Binge Now, Binge Later, Binge Never. Binge Now is go, run,
Get
right
to it right
now,
away.
watch it, right?
Yeah.
Like John said, it's on Tubi. Binge Later it's definitely worth your while. Put it on the list, but get around to it. And then Binge Never is don't waste your time. So that's the rating. This was a binge now for me for sure.
Heck yeah.
I feel like if I were putting myself back in the day of like late 90s television, like early 2000s, and this came across my TV as a child, like this would have been in the roto like every single year, just because it just fits the vibe. I love the effects. I love the scenes, like you mentioned, the gem when, the camera's crawling through the gem. It just is such a little timepiece. So just makes me, feel all the good feels. So what about you?
Yeah, it's definitely a binge now. And I mean, I've watched them all. I don't remember part 4. And I don't want to give it away to like, so basically I want Jordan to watch them, so I'm not going to spoil them for the audience as well, because if I were to, I mean, like, well, the subtitles in the movies give away the plots of them, which is kind of funny. Like the title tells you what it's about, which is kind of funny.
It's funny.
But there's like an iconic scene, I think it's in part 2, that the whole franchise is known for. Like there's one wish that the dude, the genie does. And when people think about Wishmaster, they usually think of that scene. So, like, it's going to be funny to watch them with Jordan because she has fresh eyes. And so she, you know what I mean? It's
see it through the lens of a newbie.
Yeah, probie or whatever.
Yeah. So,
I mean, but what a cool idea. Like, what a good idea. Like, yeah. I mean, I bet you if you look up the mythology, that maybe there was always a mischievous or bent angle to the wishes. Who knows? Right? Like how much they're borrowing from mythology and how much is like made up if the wishes could kill you or whatever. Yeah, an easy binge now. I mean, probably from the top of the episode, there was no conflict or guessing on this one. You know what I mean? They're probably like, oh yeah, like the way this is going, like they could probably figure it out. On TikTok, they think that's for watching Starman. One dude said, "Oh, I love that. Growing up in the 80s or blah, my dad used to show me that all the time." So like you said, if you had seen Wishmaster in the 90s, you'd watch it all the time. This guy's like, my dad showed me Starman all the time. We covered that movie a couple weeks ago, guys, and we've been putting clips. We've been throwing out clips of our episodes in short form content, which is kind of funny because like long form is the point, but then we've been doing clippies. And I'm like, oh, we're talking for 45 minutes, so we can have 25 1-minute clips. Like, in some ways, that's what it feels like. But I'm glad that people are happy and responding to the little clippies. Staff picks, if you watched anything else that you want to share with the audience that isn't the movie of the week. Do you have anything this week, Jordan?
I brought contributions this week. I wanted to just kind of loop in something that you said from the beginning of the episode. You mentioned Gone Girl. There is a pretty cool 3-part series, docu-series on Netflix right now. It's called American Nightmare. It's kind of about like a real life Gone Girl scenario. That's just, it's worth the watch. It's incredibly wild. Go watch it. Essentially, this guy and girl get abducted, and then it's essentially a home invasion, but she's the only one who gets abducted, and then she essentially gets released like hours, it's days later, and they essentially go through the entire process, but essentially the entire nation thought that they had made it up, and so goes into detail about that. It was all over essentially the news, especially in the California area, and they had referred to it as a real life Gone Girl. So definitely worth the watch. So just wanted to make a little recommendation there based off of, the beginning of the episode. But we watched a movie from 2007 called Sunshine. We watched it on YouTube. We were able to rent it there. It's with Gillian, Murphy. You've got Rose Byrne, Chris Evans, and essentially it's a sci-fi movie. It's about essentially these astronauts that are sent into space to essentially restart our sun. Like, this is obviously in the future. The Earth is like frozen over, super cold, and they essentially have to deliver this payload that would like start the sun essentially back up to like provide heat to the Earth and keep our planet alive.
Their mistake was looking for the first spaceship that went up to there to do it. Yeah, I love this movie that you're talking about right now.
Super
it's like
good.
a slasher movie in space.
It is, yeah, because I didn't expect for it to turn that way. I was like, oh, okay, like, I don't know. I was thinking more along the lines, and I think that's why I liked it so much. Is like there's a lot of like good science behind it, and so it's like getting interstellar vibes. It's really cool to watch, but then it kind of takes a turn in the middle of the movie, like genre wise, where you're like, oh shit, like this, things out there to like kill all of the people who are on the shuttle, the space shuttle.
How about the sun fetish, where you want to expose yourself to the sun and you like the point where you're burning yourself to death, basically?
I said that's how I would go. I would have been that guy who's like addicted to the sun, and you can like kind of see him. He's like getting all tanned and like blistery and stuff because he's like so addicted to the sun, and he loves to like just stare at it and look into it. And that part was predictable when he essentially like helps astronauts like get over from the original, space station to the second one. And I saw him, he's like, okay, still breathing. And I was like, oh, I know how he's going to go. He's going back into that room and he's like ready to just,
one of the craziest parts is Chris Evans is in the movie. Our boy, Captain America. He's just playing like an engineer, but then they figure out like, the psychopath from the other ship has booby trapped or sabotaged their ship, and they got to reset the supercomputer. But of course, the supercomputer is buried in liquid nitrogen, and so if they go in the tank, they're gonna essentially instantly freeze themselves to death. And he's like, "Oh shit, I'm the most qualified technician to go reset the computer." He's like, "Oh, suicide mission, dude."
Yeah.
Like, not even by default, like not even pulling short straws, just like literally, the only one that knows how to reset the computer or whatever.
The cool part about these movies is you're like literally on the edge of your seat the whole entire time. There's so much anxiety, like putting yourself into the scenario. So it was a fun watch. We really liked it.
Oh yeah, and I guess we should mention the mission can't fail, otherwise everybody on Earth is toast because they're literally trying to reignite a dying sun or whatever with like a nuclear missile or something like that. Because we're like there's like an ice age or I don't know. Anyway, the sun's not as strong as it should be, and they're trying to bring it back to life. I don't know.
Sun's dying. What
don't know how much is based on real science, but it's a psychological thriller, as Jordan mentioned. Anyway, that one's actually podcast worthy. I mean, it's made by Danny Boyle. Is that the director's name? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and he did 28 Days Later, so it's like him and Cillian Murphy rejoined for this. I don't know if you could call it a horror movie, but it definitely has some horror movie type moments. But it's good. It's good anyway, folks. Watch it anyway. Speaking of horrific things, watching the 4th season. Is it the 4th? Yeah, season 4 of True Detective. It's called Night Country. And I'm getting a little bummed out because it's not clear yet what the crimes in this one are all about, or the perspective of the characters are kind of not clear yet either. Except they're all dysfunctional, and because they're in like an isolated town in Alaska, their relationships are almost incestuous. Like the chief of police, played by Jodie Foster, has like slept with most of everybody in town, men and women. Like burnout relationships with all of them. But this one's bending, like not just like, so they discussed like ideology and philosophy and religion and spirituality and the supernatural as we understand it. In the other seasons, like we talked about it as like ideology and icons, but in this season, it's like a living, breathing element of the show, which is kind of frustrating because it makes the threat, as you were talking about the movie you just watched, the threat seemed to be posed and felt realistic, right? Like on the edge of your seat. In this, because of the supernatural elements, you don't feel threatened because you're like, oh yeah, ghosts and goblins, okay. You know what I mean?
Well,
You
they're
don't feel the human threat as a present force of nature because there's so many mystical elements. You're just like, okay, I'm right.
Right. Well, and I think that like spiritualness of like what they're trying to portray isn't the threat, right? Like that's kind of what they're trying to establish with the rules of that like spiritual guide. It's like sometimes they're there to help you, sometimes they're there to tell you something, sometimes they are there to hurt you. And so it's like part of this
I guess my conflict is the other ones were grounded in reality in such a way that the threat could be like in our world, right?
Right.
And in this one, you'd have to accept ghosts exist. You have to accept this supernatural element of it. And if it's just a demon, you're just like, whatever. It takes away what made the other ones work, the other seasons work. However, I was thinking that maybe in the beginning of the season that the scientists just woke up like an ancient virus that we don't have an antibody for, and it's making people hallucinate, that it's not actually supernatural, that people are just hallucinating because they've contaminated the drinking water. And if that became the truth of the season, I'd be like, oh, you know what I mean? But I don't think it's going that way, but that would be really cool.
I would also agree that like the arc of the story is kind of hard to figure out. I'm not that far in right now. I'm like, I think I'm still in the middle of like the third episode.
Okay,
I don't
let
even
me
know
tell
how many
you who's died so
are.
far.
Stop it. No. Yeah. I'm only on like the third episode halfway through. So, and I don't really know how many episodes are out.
She took that seriously as if I was really going to spoil who's dead.
I'm like, la, 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 la. Anyways.
That's it. Let's wrap it up. Okay. Thank you for listening. You can tune in. You can comment on our YouTube or our Castbox. You can listen wherever the hell podcasts are these days. You can watch it on YouTube or you can watch the clippies. You can stumble upon our social channels and watch them as clips. We'll be back with another twisted relationship style movie next week. I used to tell people so they could watch it, but maybe I'll just like, maybe this whole year I'll say nothing and people just turn it on and figure it out, you know? As you said, if you're stumbling through something in the middle of the night, like flipping through channels on cable TV, like, what is this? Let me tune in. And maybe that's how we'll do it. Now, about who dies in that show we were talking about. Which character are you attached to?
You're going to jail. Yeah.
Movie
Straight
jail?
to jail. Yes. Yeah, you're going to show jail.
Dang. You ever been in a movie theater with people spoiling the movie as you're watching it?
No, because
like repeat watchers explaining the plot to somebody next to you?
No, because I'm typically the repeat watcher and I know how to keep my mouth shut in the movie. My least favorite is people who have to
just give you Taco Bell.
Yeah, but I'm good. I'm silent. I'm good to go. But let me tell you, the worst thing to do in a movie is to ask questions in which the plot will reveal. That's the whole point of the movie, is to have questions and let the movie tell you what the answer is. And so
why do you think people ask that as they're watching? Like they can't process the information or they can't handle the stress?
It's like probably the stress, honestly. Like they want answers now. And I'm like, if you were to watch, you would find out. You and I are in the same boat, right? I don't know more information than you know. So that's how I feel. So anyways, yeah.